Hi, it's Sarah. I'm here to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of living in on-campus housing, otherwise known as the dorms. So, the first year of college, many students move into the dorms, and even after the first year, a lot of students continue to live in the dorms for a variety of reasons. At some colleges, that is easier than others because they give you guaranteed housing, they give you priority maybe the first year, but then maybe not after that. But some colleges allow you to live in the dorms way beyond your first year, maybe even all 4 years. But there are a variety of reasons why people choose to live in the dorms or choose not to live in the dorms, and so I'm here to kind of break that down for you. So, again, this is all my opinion in this blog that I'm kind of referencing, but this has some great advice for, kind of what to think about when you're moving into the dorms or choosing not to live in the dorms. So, some of the pros that I would consider when thinking about moving into the dorms. The first and foremost, and probably the biggest one, I would say independence and responsibility. When you move into the dorms, your life really becomes your own, and you are living in campus housing, so it's university rules and things like that, but you're really taking responsibility for your own life. You're making sure that you stick to your own schedule. If things are not working for you, then you have the responsibility to make moves, to change that, to make your life happier. You're responsible for getting up at the right time or, filling your schedule with things that make you happy and make you productive and have motivation to keep your life on track. So you do have a form of independence. You don't really have to, conform to maybe your parents' rules or whoever you lived with before coming to college. You have the freedom to kind of make your own schedule. You also can generate a really fun social life by living in the dorms. And so when you live there, oftentimes it'll be co-ed, sometimes it'll be based on a certain group that you wanted to live with, sometimes it will be single gender, things like that. And so you generate a lot of friends that way. You kind of have this built-in family that when you have a really tough day, you can always come home to these people and they're kind of your home. You can rant to them, you can talk about how your day went, you can study with them if you want to too. And you have these friends that are always around. A lot of times people in the dorm will leave their doors open just to kind of have a chat on the way to the bathroom or on their way to the laundry room or things like that. So it's a really great way to make friends your first year and before you even get into classes, kind of have this group of people that you can do things with or that you can confide in, especially your roommates as well. I actually am still best friends with my roommates and a lot of my floor mates to this day. And so, as you know, I graduated last year in 2020, but I still keep in contact with these same people. So they can be lifelong friends, definitely. It's also great to be close to campus. So a lot of campus dorms are really close to campus. I actually only walked 5 minutes to class my freshman year. And I lived in the dorms just my freshman year and then moved out. But it was great being able to wake up right before my classes, especially when I had those 8 a.m.s and just kind of stroll to class. Maybe if you bike to class, it might be a little bit further, but still usually dorms, campus housing is no more than 10 to 15 minutes of a walk. And that really depends on what college you go to, but even sometimes colleges have dorms that are on campus. And so you're living among the buildings that you actually go to class in. So it really depends on the college, but it's really great to be that close, especially if you're working late at night in the libraries, in a studio, things like that. Much safer and much quicker to get home in those wee hours of the morning. So it's not only a thing that's great in terms of ease, it's not only a thing that's great in terms of ease, but it's also great in terms of safety and actually, getting where you need to go in late hours. In addition, when you live in the dorms, you generally have a packaged dining plan that comes with that. So because of the layout of your dorm, you probably won't have, a kitchen. Sometimes, places do have kitchens for you to use, but a lot of times you might have maybe a mini fridge and a freezer, maybe a microwave. A lot of times they don't allow you to have hot plates or things like that. So they give you a packaged dining plan where you can actually go to a cafeteria and get maybe all you can eat or packaged meals or something like that. So you have these ready to go meals that are hot and warm when you get there, and they're usually really tasty depending on where you go. I actually really liked the dining hall food at Berkeley. The lasagna was my favorite. And so it was really great to, not really have to worry about cooking. When all of these other things in your life are changing, you have the ability to walk in and get a meal on your way to class really easily. In addition, in the dorms, you generally have a cleaning crew and housing staff that will really take care of a lot of the cleaning, chores that you have to do in the dorm. And I want to caution you in saying this because I don't think that you should not treat these crews as, your personal waiting staff. They're doing that job and they really want to create this healthy, clean space for you. But it's really important that you also clean up after yourself. But they are in charge of, usually cleaning the common areas, the laundry room or things like that. And oftentimes they won't go into your dorm, so that's kind of your territory. It depends on the college. But you do have this extra support, so you don't have to worry about cleaning your own bathroom, really consistently and kind of fitting that on your schedule, which can be hard to do if you're moving out of your, childhood home for the first time, or wherever your parents or guardians live. So it can be much easier to kind of manage those chores when you do have a support staff actually doing that for you. Plus, it's a communal space, so it's not just you using the space. It's great to have a staff that's really, can take care of all of those cleaning chores for you. But again, treat them with respect. You should not make their job harder. When you live in the dorms, you should, like I said in the beginning, responsibility. That's a big part of it. You're living alone, and you're living with your friends, but you're not living with your guardian. So you really have to learn to clean for yourself as well. Housing guarantee priority. So this is a big one for a lot of colleges. You actually get guaranteed housing for all 4 years. For some places like Berkeley, it's only, you only get priority for the first year. And after that, you can apply for it, but it's not guaranteed that you will get it. And most students don't live in the dorms after their first year. But in a lot of places, this, having this guarantee or having this priority can make housing a lot easier to find. And especially when there, might be a housing crisis around, or housing is a little bit expensive or stressful to find, it's really great to have that option right there for you. And so you can live really close to campus. You don't have to really weigh all of your options in terms of what you can afford and how close to campus you want, and make sure it's a safe space or things like that. It can be really easy to have that option just, within your own college. So those are some of the pros of living on campus. There are a ton more that I would love to talk to any of you about. If you schedule a consulting call with me, I'd be happy to go through, a lot of my experiences living in the dorms. Then there are some cons of living in the dorms. It's definitely an adjustment if you move away from, where you lived before college into this room with, sometimes strangers that you've never met before. So one of the biggest cons I would say about living in the dorms is you are under university rules and oversight. So that can be a good thing in terms of, safety standards or security or cleanliness or things like that. But there are also rules and oversight that you have to follow as a resident of the dorms. And that can range from, substance use or who you invite into the dorms, or what you do at night, or your overall behavior in the dorms, things like that. And so, this obviously makes sense for colleges to have. They really have to track what their students are doing in the dorms, especially during COVID times. You are going to see a lot of restrictions in terms of, maybe when you can go out, or if you can go out, or who you can see, or who you can bring into the dorms and things like that. And that will continue, beyond COVID as well. These are spaces that that are owned by the university, so you have to abide by those rules. But it's important to know that, that might limit some of the behavioral or life things that you really enjoy. And so I would just be aware of those rules before you go into the dorms, and make sure that that is something you can live with when signing into them, because you don't want to start breaking those rules once you've moved in, because dorms do have the ability to kick you out if you really have broken any of their rules. In addition, I would say that dorms are generally more expensive than anywhere else you will live, and there's a variety of reasons for that. So usually when you go to college, you have your tuition payment, and you also have your room and board payment, and those are often billed separately because you have the choice of living in these dorms or not living in them. So for instance, Berkeley's base tuition is just over $14,000, and then room and board adds an extra $17,000 or so, maybe a little bit more than that to your total. Obviously, there's also supplemental tuition for out-of-state students that adds a little bit more. But it's important to note that these are separate, and room and board, especially for Berkeley, costs even more than tuition does. So it's a large chunk of what you're paying to go to college. And so when you move out of the dorms, it might get really cheap to live around campus. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people move out of the dorms their first year if they have that option, because it can be less expensive. But the reason that it is more expensive, I would say, is because in the dorms, like I mentioned, you're getting that cleaning staff. They're taking care of your common spaces. They're cleaning your bathroom. They're cleaning the laundry room. You have security. So there are people actually working to make sure that no strangers come into your dorm, things like that. And also, maintenance of a lot of those machines or kitchen areas or common areas. So let's say if the laundry breaks down, you want to have someone that can quickly come and fix it so you can actually do your laundry. So there are a lot of things that that makes sense to have that cost so high. And also a lot of places have amenities. You might have a gym, you might have a study area, you might have a computer room. And so that's really what you're paying for. You're getting a lot more than you might if you're living in an on-campus or off-campus apartment. So that is something to consider just because it can be very expensive. And there are colleges that will give, stipends for that or maybe reduce the cost of living. But usually that might not be the case. It's just something you really want to talk about with your family before moving to campus. In addition, when you move into the dorms, it's often pretty small. And so that's an adjustment that a lot of people have to get used to when going into college. For me, it really wasn't that much of an issue. I didn't have a huge room growing up. And so, going into a small room, I was kind of used to the space. But now I was sharing it with two other people, So had my bunk bed, I had my little space, I had a closet, I had a little, a drawer to keep some of my clothes. But it was much smaller than I was used to. So I had to make sure that I limited the number of things that I was bringing to campus, clothing, art supplies, because I love to do art. So it really depends on where you're moving and especially how many people you are rooming with. If you choose to live in a single, that is more expensive, but you will get more space. And so it's really about what you can deal with, what kind of situation you want when in college. I would say I got really used to it and living really close to people actually made me feel closer to them, and I found some of my best friends that way, but it is an adjustment. So you don't really have a lot of privacy, usually when you get up in the morning, when you go to brush your teeth, when you get back from the shower, when you're about to sleep at night, there's always someone around, which for me was great. I always had someone to talk to rant about things to. Late at night we would lay in our beds and just kind of talk about life and talk about things that had happened. So for me, it was really comforting. But it is a big thing to get used to just because you might not be used to that small of a space, especially if you want kind of your own space to, you're more introspective. That can be a challenge sometimes. So that's something to think about. Maybe find spaces on campus where you can be alone and take a little bit of time to think to yourself. An added thing that I would talk about is the COVID concern. So this is something that's new that I didn't totally experience in the dorms, but it's something to think about. And this is going to change a lot in the coming months, as COVID develops and as vaccines roll out and things like that. But there is still a COVID concern. So whether that's your own personal concern based on, not wanting to put yourself at risk if you have underlying conditions, or if you want to see other people that you don't want to put at risk, things like that. That's something to think about. It's something to think, you got to think about what universities are doing in terms of limiting that risk, what rules they have in place, what people around you are doing. So are they seeing a ton of people? Are they being safe? Are they wearing masks? Things like that. Living in the dorms is going to increase your risk. You're just around more people, more net people. And so that means you just have to think a little bit more about what you are doing and what the people around you are doing. And as long as you are really, really safe and definitely abide by these rules that the University Housing Board is putting in place, I think it's very doable and it can be a great experience. But I would say that the dynamic might change a little bit during COVID, and some college students have already experienced that this past year. So it's a little bit different of a social dynamic sometimes. So that is something to think about. Definitely do research into your own school and what they are doing to limit those COVID concerns. So this is something, this list that I just gave is something to kind of reference. And there are definitely more pros and cons that, again, I'd be happy to talk to you about if you schedule a consulting call with me and kind of sit down and get really into the details of what my experience was like. But with any, as with any other life change, a really big, moving decision or going to college in general, or anything else that you decide to do in life, it requires planning and thought. It requires weighing, the pros and cons. It requires thinking about what really makes you happy, what brings you joy, and what kind of living situation you want. So I would highly recommend living in the dorms my first year. It was amazing. It was a great way to meet new people. And to me, the pros definitely outweighed the cons. But it is something to think about, especially in terms of finances. If it's too expensive, that's something to talk to your family about. If there is a large COVID concern, in your family, that's something to talk to them about. So it's definitely not an easy decision, but I hope that these pros and cons help you kind of think about what might be best for you and your family, and, kind of make that decision a little bit easier once it comes time to do that. Whether you're thinking about moving in this fall, this summer, whatever kind of arrangement you have, or just in, the coming years after you actually apply to college and get in. So wherever you are in your journey, it's great to start thinking about that and start thinking about what your housing situation will be like. So I hope this helped, and please definitely reach out to our team if you have further questions about housing.